So hello and welcome. My name is Constantin Kogan. I'm your host at Holistic Investments. And I'm delighted to have today David Kay, who's the Chief Investment Officer and Executive Director of Liti Capital. Hi, David.
Hey, Constantin, how are you?
Amazing. You know, it's summer day, amazing weather in New York. We're both in New York, actually. So, so excited to have you here. And you're here with amazing project, quite new to me. And I would love to explore more. Like, what do you bring? Like, how do you democratize and decentralize litigation funding, which is quite insightful. So. And before starting, traditionally, we have to throw a legal disclaimer. So this content is for informational purposes only and should not construe any such information as material, legal, tax, and investment, financial, or any other advice. So now we're kind of off the hook. We can talk about it like freely and
Great.
Drill down. What is Liti Capital? But before that, we want to start with more human side of things, right? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, I know that you won several awards, like winning some like big cases over $1 billion in litigation. I know that you yourself has an amazing career and you're quite educated, I would say, right? So, and how did you get to crypto? So say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thanks again for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So my background, I actually started my career as a lawyer at a firm called Aiken Gump in the city. I then became an investment banker. And I think my first claim to fame is I think I was the last employee hired by Bear Stearns, believe it or not. So I was hired, never started. It promptly crashed. And believe it or not, in order not to sue them, they let me keep my signing bonus. And so that's how I got my first apartment in New York. So that's
luck.
First, that's it. There you go. That was my big kickoff. And I went to Jefferies and I worked there as a banker for a couple of years. And then I went to what was at the time a public market 30-day liquidity hedge fund. And my job ultimately was to create a private equity arm. Mm-hmm. And the focus of that was litigation financing. And by the way, people thought I was nuts. Okay. I had a pretty good track record for investing in distressed debt, more what at that time were normal things. Right. And I think we could have raised a much bigger fund if we had gone that route.
How much was the fund?
So the first fund that I raised was $72 million. Okay, which in New York world is nothing, right? Yeah. I mean, really, really, really tiny. And it could have been much bigger, but I was completely focused on this idea that litigation finance is the future, right? Because 10 years ago, it really wasn't being done, and it definitely wasn't mainstream. Mm-hmm. But I believed, and so I raised that fund. We ultimately raised 2 more funds, but when I left, it was a little over $1 billion of total capital committed. And yeah, I was the portfolio manager, and we did a lot of really amazing stuff. Why crypto? I ask myself that question all the time, actually. No, it's, look, crypto is the future. I think that part is clear. And for me, litigation finance is a place that I'm really comfortable, right? I like it. I feel at home there. Being entrusted with people's money and acting as a fiduciary and turning that money into more money, that part is the easy part, believe it or not. For me, crypto's new. And crypto is what I'm drinking from the fire hose and learning. But look, one of the things that was the hardest for me on the PE side was most of the people that I knew and was friends with, and where I came from, I didn't come from much, right? My parents couldn't invest in my fund because they didn't have over $1 million of liquidity. My brother and sister couldn't invest in my fund because they didn't have $1 million of liquidity. And that was reason number one why I'm doing this. The DeFi community, okay? And what crypto and the blockchain has enabled is these private equity investments, and I know we'll talk more about this hopefully, these private equity investments have always been for the 1%, right? Yeah. And that's it. It is time for that to change, right? And so the real thing that drove me here was this idea that I could do what I did for everybody. And I mean, look, that's what got me really excited about it.
Yeah, that's an impressive story. Like, I believe in this ethos, like I that's where I started my companies as well, and the funds I participated in. That's to share, to actually show empathy and the human side of things, like not just only like, oh, let's make money. Because look, and I've looked at Bloomberg Finance when I was just preparing, like, for our interview, that, like even, the returns in litigation funding was impressive. It's actually outperformed like in a hedge fund, like in any credit, real estate, or private equity. Like, that's pretty stellar, like, in terms of like how they perform. And we will go deeper into the crypto side of things, but I think, litigation is one of those niches, I would say, that not clear to everyone at all, right? So maybe we can spare a little bit, like few minutes, just to explain how litigation funding works, and we can split it into two aspects. One is like how it will work in traditional format, right? When you have in different like returns, and you have a success fee, you have like investor capital, and you have like claimants, you have like the resolution that helps people to work with different sizes of companies, right? And then from there we go to a deeper dive, like how you revolutionize this aspect.
Yep. Yeah. No, those are both good questions. So I think, litigation financing at its core, right? Let's use an example, right? But the point of it is to provide capital for everybody to be able to compete and protect themselves on a level playing field, right? So this idea of helping people, I have never been under the impression that I'm going out and doing charity or saving children. But even in litigation finance, the core has been trying to do the right thing for people that need it. Okay, because entities that have a huge amount of money can finance their own litigations, right? But let's give an example, because I think it's a good question. Let's say, yeah, go ahead.
What is the minimum check? I will go like step by step also. What's the minimum check for the entity to participate in litigation finance?
So the minimum check for somebody to invest in us, or for us to invest in a case?
Both.
Yeah. So to invest in us is 1 penny. Okay, that was a clear line, right? This is going to be for anyone. You can get invested here for 1 penny, and that's not going to change, right? That is the basic. I mean, I'll say it again because it's really important. I'm lucky enough where at this point in my career, I can choose to do what I want to do, right? And there are 2 reasons I'm here. That's number 1, right? Number 1 is everybody's going to be able to participate. It's ludicrous, right? Some of the stupidest people I know have millions of dollars. Okay. Some of the smartest people I know don't. That demarcation line of people who are smart enough to participate in a product that's generating 30 to 50% cash on cash annual returns is absurd. Its time is over, and we're moving past it, right? So that part's clear.
Okay.
In terms of what we would invest in, I think generally we're open, right? I think usually it's around $500,000 to $1 million. And for the legal fees and experts and strategy that people need, it's not a lot of money, right? A lot of the cases that I invest in end up costing $5 to $10 million. And I think it's important to break down why, right? So let's say you started this amazing podcast, okay? And I know you're doing great, but let's say, I don't know, huge co A comes and says, you know what? I will pay you $50 million, okay, for the syndication rights for your podcast. And you're like, great. Well, first of all, you're like 75, right? Let's be clear. We're not gonna keep it at 50, but
for sure.
Let's say you split the middle and you reach an agreement at $60 million, okay? And you sign the contract, right? And the contract and they have to pay you their first payment 3 months from now, okay? And 2 months from now, huge co A sends you a notice saying that you violated the terms of the contract, okay? Because you failed to disclose to them that you had a dispute with an employee 3 years ago that was settled. Something ridiculous like that, okay? What do you do, right? Huge co now is not paying you the money, and you have to go get it, okay? And you have 2 choices, right? Let's be clear about what huge co is going to do. They're going to force you in almost any system anywhere in the world to spend $5 to $10 million to go get that money. Okay, that is the cost. When you're going up against a huge white shoe law firm on the other side, right? They can force you to spend that money. You don't have it, right? Or let's say you have it, but spending $5 to $10 million on the hopes that you're going to be successful a couple of years from now.
Yeah.
What do you do? So there are two things people do. Okay. Number one is they walk away. The number of people that walk away, you would be flabbergasted. All right. That's option one. Option two is HugeCo knows what they're doing, right? HugeCo will come up to you and they'll be like, we'll settle this. Don't worry. We'll give you $2 million right now. Right. And a lot of times you take it because you don't have a choice. Right. That's where we come in. All right. Where we come in is we step in and we say, you know what? You got a great case and that's ridiculous. We will give you $5 million to fund the cost of top legal counsel, top experts, our strategic advice and counsel, right? And we will be on your side from here to the end, right? Now the field is even. And if we take 20% of that and you end up with $60 million, right? You're now a cool $45 million better than you were before. And importantly, if you lose, it costs you nothing. There's no risk to you. There's no downside. It's not a loan where you sign up to the loan and you're responsible. It's an investment that we make in people in their cases. So let me pause there. But that's kind of a, example of the types of things that we see all the time.
No, I think it's a great model. So basically in more like simplified words, so you're working for success fee. You don't take anything up front. You just evaluate the case, right? You make sure that it's worth it. You analyze all the pros and cons, and then you step in and you protect your customers, right? So Correct. Maybe let's clarify a few things. What is the minimum size of the case that you would even undertake?
So, there are two sides to what we're doing, right? And what we've talked about so far is the 90% that's for profit, right? What I'm sure we will talk about is the 10% that is not for profit. But with the 90% that is of profit, I think it depends a little bit, right? Ideally, the case would be for at least $5 to $10 million, right? The average cases that we have are usually in the kind of 50 to 200. So in the portfolio right now, we have one case where the claim is for $1 billion, right? We have another case where the claim is for $75 million and a third case where the claim is for $200 million. And that's an average range for the types of cases that we've seen. But I've taken cases where it was $5 million. I've even taken some cases where it's $1 million, right? Depending on what happened to the person, what stage they're in and what they need. But generally where our services are the most useful, right, is when you as the plaintiff or claimant are fighting for a reasonable sized pot against somebody who's willing to spend $5 to $10 million to fight you. And it's not a fair race, right? It's the going bringing a knife to a gunfight type of scenario.
Yeah. So maybe you can provide some case studies which are, like, I would say, notable, some popular industries where it's probably like easy for people to understand, like, from what we've heard, like from the world, which are successful and unsuccessful. And maybe we can just explain a little bit what happened there, like, how you would be useful with your solution. Yeah,
sure. So an example, I'll give you an example in the employment industry. Okay, we see a lot of this. There's one deal where a guy came in and was hired by a family that's billionaires, okay, to build out a brand. All right, it's a liquid brand. Let's just call it a liquid brand, right? I got to keep most of this stuff no names, okay? A liquid brand. You would know the brand, okay? And this guy spent 10 years building out this brand and built it from basically nothing to something that, that most people know or would have heard of, or if you Googled it, you'd be like, oh my God, right? And the business last year, even in COVID, right, made $200 million of profit in cash. Okay, not EBITDA, not revenue, straight cash.
That's okay.
Yep, 100% owned by this family. All right. At the beginning of the project, this guy bought in when it was worth nothing for 10%. All right. He paid like $50,000 for 10%. The business, let's for round numbers, it's probably a 12 times multiple business, but let's assume 10. Okay. So at 200 million, easy numbers, right? At $200 million, the business is worth $2 billion. his 10% is worth $200 million. Okay. They're gonna fire him for cause. Okay. Even though he's done nothing wrong. And you know why they're gonna fire him for cause? It's makes perfect sense. By the way, there's a part of me, I like to do nice things, but people don't generally think of me as the nicest guy. So I'll put that out there now. But it makes sense, because here's what they're gonna do, right? Once they terminate him and he has no income or nothing, even though they're gonna lose 2 to 3 years later, all right? If they lose, guess what they have to pay? The $200 million that they already gave away, right? It's not, this isn't money that's coming from, like, when they're thinking about how much they own, they knew they owned 90% of the business, right? So their worst case scenario is to spend $5 to $10 million, hold on to their money, right? For 2 to 3 years and pay them exactly what they otherwise would have owed. But what will happen, absent us, is, you know what happens? If they came up and they said, here's $50 million right now, right? That's life-changing money, right? You can't just, life-changing money, okay? And that's what they offered him, $50 million. And he was gonna take it because he didn't have a choice. And now we've stepped in, and there's no way that he is gonna take that money. Not happening, right? But think about it from his perspective. $50 million is game-changing, right? And now these guys, even though this guy really did nothing wrong, right? They would have made $150 million, right? By the way, even if we settle for $175 million, which, if people are listening, we're open. At 175, we can have a conversation, okay? They make $25 million.
Of course.
Just because they're the big guys, right? So that's one. So
you're putting up kind of the status quo on this inequality, so to speak, right? Where people are not knowledgeable enough, and they cannot fight for themselves. They have to come to certain consensus, just because, they're putting in front of the wall, right? And then that's just, this part of, when you describe it, I really feel it. I would probably take 50 million, because knowing I was once in this long process, especially when you're dealing. So you're describing a scenario when they're let's say in one jurisdiction, one country, everything is contract. And I can imagine how crazy it is if you're talking about, let's say, the company. Now it's a COVID world. A lot of people work remotely, and the employee can be, let's say, in Europe, the company is in US, or vice versa. So if it coming to international arbitration court, that's even forget about it. That's even more years, and God knows what's going to happen. So,
and by the way, you have to get paid, right? Yeah. Don't forget, this you'll hear me say a lot. Okay, a judgment is just the single most expensive piece of paper you've ever bought. Okay, the game here is not to win in court or to get a judgment. The game is to get paid as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and cross-border enforcement is not fun.
Yeah, it's so basically it doubles any kind of resolutions, right, in the judgment cases. Yep. So those are crazy, things that happen to people, and you help to solve it. So let's talk about so there is a centralized solution, and you're going to be aiming to be one of the top world leaders in litigation finance, right? And
that's right.
But there is a differentiator in what you're doing, right? So you're probably going to be the first one, who are introducing the decentralized aspect to it, right? So let's talk about this type of innovation. What is actually behind your solution and decentralization? I know you're issuing 2 tokens, which one is going to be the equity token, another is going to be utility token. So this is interesting structure. So far, I know only 2 companies who probably done that. Maybe there are more, but I know only a few. And I would love to learn more. How did you come up with this tokenomics, the strategy? What represents the equity piece and what represents the utility piece? And then we'll go deeper into it.
Yeah, it's a great question. So look, to our knowledge too, I think we are the first, as far as we can tell, we're the first private equity company to really go out and try and basically do their raise through everybody, as opposed to being beholden to some institutional investors. And certainly, to our knowledge, at least, the first litigation financer that's doing it. I think in terms of structure, so in order to accomplish this, we've had to set up a dual structure, okay? And the dual structure is the company's based in Switzerland, right? And like you said, there are only 2 other companies that we know of too who have gotten this special permission from Switzerland, right, to list what's called an equity token. And we have a letter, I think it's on our website, or we'll put it up there, from the Swiss regulatory authorities, basically saying, you're okay, right? You're not a security. and your structure is acceptable under Swiss law. So if you become a shareholder or token holder of ours, you are protected by Swiss law. We are subject to Swiss law. We can be sued. We're not disappearing, right, or going away. So there is an equity token that's out there that you can buy on our website. And that is the only way to get equity directly in the company, okay? Whether you're an institutional investor or my mom.
And just to be clear, US investors, accredited investors will also be able to participate.
Correct. That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, but then there's a secondary piece, which is that token can be split into what's called a wLITI, right? And the ratio of LITI to wLITI is 5,000 to 1.
So
right? And we're going to go back to that ratio.
Exactly. LITI is equity token. The wLITI is a utility token.
Yeah, it's the trading. It's the way to think about it is they're one and the same, right? It is the trading version of that token. So the way that I like to explain it is, let's say you wanted a pizza, right? You can either order a large pizza or you can get 8 slices, right? Those are the same thing. They have different utilities. You can take them apart and put them back together as long as you don't eat the pizza, obviously. But like they're just different ways of effectuating and utilizing the same thing, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that for me, it makes sense, although it raises more questions. As an investor, and like,
Sure.
you first ask yourself, okay, so in terms of like, it's interesting because your attorneys yourself, right? And so you first ask yourself, okay, so why would you need like to complicate this structure, right? If you have already like, an equity token and you can raise all the money in the world realistically, like with all this multi-million or multi-billion connections, right? Then there should be a different explanation to, which I know already partially what you explained, but I want you to also maybe elaborate a little bit on this, like what's the actual value behind the trading, like of, let's say, wLITI?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's a couple of different value propositions, right? And I think we have to split them into 2 buckets, right? The first is why separate into 2 tokens, right? And then the second is what's the value of the wLITI, right? What's interesting about the wLITI? Yeah. I think the first question is on the 2 tokens, right? And on the 2 tokens, the way that the regulations are set up today, right? The company can only sell tokens to non-US people, right? Or accredited investors. And that's not everybody. And that's not acceptable. Okay. And so what we've done is where we can be is the wLITIs, which are broken up versions of the LITI, those can be traded at will, right? By anybody, anywhere around the world. Okay. Anybody can own them. Anyone can buy them. Anyone can get the benefits of them, right? And it can go back and forth between a token and an equity. And that's how we get it to everybody. And
to be clear, you're gonna be listing on Uniswap, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's gonna be on Uniswap. And so anybody can buy it, and you can buy it for a penny, $1. Everybody can participate, right? And that is, that's the thing that really matters for us. And the only way that we can do that is by splitting them up. Now, from a tokenomics perspective, it has additional value, okay? Which is to say that the company cannot sell wLITIs, okay? And so what that means is that out in the marketplace, the only people who are listing the wLITIs are investors, okay? The company can sell tokens, right? Equity tokens, but not wLITIs. And so we cannot, nor will we, go out and flood the market with wLITIs, okay? The only way more wLITIs can come into existence is if somebody comes to the company and buys a token, right? And then that token can be split. What does that mean? That means every dollar of that, I'm going to be investing, okay, into a portfolio of assets that are going to be there. They're not going to disappear. They're not going to go away. They're going to generate cash. And so there is that level of safety between having this 2-tiered system that I think is attractive, right? Number one, it means it's available for everybody, right? Number two, it means that the company is going to get cash from people who buy the token and invest it separately. And we are not going to be able to go out in the market and sell wLITIs. Last follow-up to that. Does that mean that nobody in the company is making any money on the listing or sale of wLITIs on the 24th? That's absolutely what it means, right? None of us are making a penny off of that.
Mm-hmm. And that is really interesting that you mentioned that, because that will be my next question. What's like, so you're going to be earning money, right? And a lot of the money will be reinvested, right, back to the company, and that will be allowing the investors to basically participate in the high performing litigation finance market, right? So let's talk about what actually represents wLITI, right? So I think that'll help people to clarify. So we talked a little bit. So just to summarize, maybe the way I understood it. So the Liti token, it's an equity token. So represent a stock of Liti Capital, right? So basically you're like Switzerland, Geneva-based company, right? And then you regulate it. You have, everything is up to par, right? So it's a hybrid model, right? Combining digital currency aspect and the traditional finance. Now, the one Liti token, it represents one share of Liti stock, correct? And in other
correct.
words, so again, you have to go through KYC, know your customer, and then you will be able to participate in Liti. Now, wLITI, it's an ERC20 token, which you're going to list eventually in Uniswap, right? And then you are going to be able to provide some liquidity to the market, and then, as you mentioned, convert it to the Liti token. So the conversion rate, again, the way I've read your papers, so that I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it's 5,000 wLITIs, like it's equal to one Liti token, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So now
that's right.
So that will do what, like, that's going to be one Swiss franc, like 1 cent of Swiss franc. So that's going to be what, like, 0.11 US dollars, right? So that will be
the
starting price, right?
Right. So we're just on exactly. So that you just first of all, you explained it perfectly. Second of all, everyone asks why the 5,001. You nailed it, right? We set that ratio because the pre-launch investors bought at $50 a share. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so that is the price. We're not charging anybody any different, right? Equality for all. So how do we make it so that the wLITI starts at a penny? That's how we do it. So that 5,001 is just to ensure that even if you have 1 penny, right, that you can invest in this. And when this thing is trading at like $10, hopefully people will look back and they'll say, why did it start that way? And the answer was because we needed to make it accessible to everybody. That's the grand totality of the 5,001.
And I think that's brilliant, because that means this representation will grow as your revenue, will grow. The token holders will grow with you, right?
Yep.
Now the other aspect. So how many be like? Let me ask you. After the TGE, what do you say? What will be the circulation market cap in circulation?
So in circulation today, will be so the $30 million is the market cap. Okay. And so the coins that we have circulated, there's about 600,000 Liti tokens. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting, here's an interesting piece to take back for your viewers. So of that, okay, only 12 million is actually in people's hands. So $12 million is in people's hands. Okay. The remaining $18 million is listed as being in circulation, because we had to go to a shareholders meeting and get those listed. And so we are reporting it in circulation, but that will represent the next $18 million that the company raises. Okay. Mm-hmm. So very important for people who are paying attention. So if you see a $10 million raise being announced by the company, there's no additional dilution for the first $18 million. So you can either think about the market cap as 12 million, or there's no dilution for the next 18 million, which is super attractive to people paying attention. But we didn't want to have any shenanigans, right? If there are shares that are issued and approved by Switzerland, we are listing them as outstanding. So it's a very conservative view, but I think people are going to like it. I hope.
So that's impressive. So again, you're distributing 80% of all your profits will be allocated to Liti tokens, and you will repay it in dividends, right? Yeah. So again, the price, again, not an investment advice, but the price potentially will increase logically, right? If that happens. So that will be attractive for your holders to actually hold it. But there's additional advantage, if I'm not mistaken. You also give you the voting rights, so the governance aspect, correct?
Yeah, so the governance aspects are at the Liti token holder level. And so obviously if you hold that, then you vote just like any other company, right? And I think, in terms of profits, look, that's another important piece for me, right? Like it's not that we're taking this money and we're using it. And if I invest $100 million, right, and make $200 million, then now I'm holding $300 million of people's money. We're going to try and dividend that back out, right? We're going to keep the 100 million, but we're going to dividend it back out because this is about generation of cash too. It's not just, the value of the stock going up. That's super attractive to everybody, right? But I hope that we are starting to advance as a community, right? And that ultimately people who've done well in crypto can allocate capital in a way, right, where they can get 30 to 50% cash on cash returns, and they can actually get that cash, right? And by the way, and we can send it out in crypto, right? It's not that we're again sending it out in cryptocurrency. It's just that, we need something that appreciates in value and pays consistently, right? So that's, it's a big part of the value proposition that we have here is that, we're going to increase value and we're going to pay it out. We're going to pay it out.
So how much did you raise so far?
$12 million.
12 million. And how much are you raising? What's your closing, estimate that you're wanting to raise?
In the totality of the fund. So I'd like to be at between $500 and $750 million, right? So the last fund that I was at was about $1 billion. And I think above $1 billion, and you start to become a little bit like an index, right? It does become a little bit harder to generate outsized returns the bigger you get, right? But it is also important to have some heft, right? So if there are big cases where there's big potential outcomes and it's going to cost money, I want to be able to participate in it. But from a portfolio construction viewpoint, I'm not going to spend 10%, right, on a single case because I do need to make sure that our investors are protected in terms of some diversification in the portfolio, right? Both in terms of types of cases and also where the cases are in the timeline, early, middle of case or enforcement. So, ideally, I'd like to be at 500 to 750 million over the next 2 to 3 years, right? I think this year, if we had 25 to 50 million dollars, I would feel good about it, right? But I think that, that's the cap. So the highest number of 12 million is the most Liti tokens that we can put out. And at $50 a share, which is where they are now, that's $600 million, right? So that's where we've capped ourselves for this. But that does bring up an interesting point, if I can digress for a second, which is this is different than a currency. This is not a currency, it's a company. Okay. So what that means is when we raise more money, that money's not going in our pockets. We're using that money to buy assets that are going to generate cash that's going to go out to our token holders, right? So it is a positive thing, right? When you hear an announcement that we have raised money, that means we are going to go get more assets that are not correlated to the price of Bitcoin, right? They're assets that stand on their own. When you hear we invest in a new case, we have another asset. You have another asset. We have a broader portfolio. That's good, right? Like those are all things that are positive things. Those are things that people should get excited about.
So basically, it's like a revenue share model. That's what you're doing. We have an operating business, successful business. Your job is to make sure that you're profitable, and you know how to do that because you have an exceptional team and already like proof of concept, and you have years of experience. And then what you're doing is you just putting it out there for the larger like an audience and help them to participate with you. So just to be clear, the way I understand that, like Liti Capital team, they don't need like retail investors' money. The way that they're doing it is just to raise awareness that it's possible, and it's more like democratizing the access and giving like this amazing example, like how it is possible to do that, right? As opposed to centralized solutions where like only like high net worth individuals and like hedge fund managers are able to do that, right? So that's why I'm curious about it. That's why I respect it. However, I do have one concern, which is again like one last piece of legal thing I want to close, and then we'll go deeper into the team, and I'm happy to hear more about your plans, like
please.
Horizon. So, because of the DeFi aspect, you're going to launch in Uniswap, and as we know, like again, there are a lot of things that are happening there, like so right now. it's a mix of capital, right? So as long as the any token, you know, is on Uniswap, right, and anyone can buy it. So people don't have KYC there, so it kind of mixes in one pool. So that means technically, if somebody like, you know, I got this question from someone else, by the way, so that's why I'm just referring it to you with your with your
Please.
token as well. So when it mixes, like, you know, and it goes through different, like, you know, liquidity pools, which are mixed from unknown people who didn't do KYC, and then it returns back to you. Let's imagine like you do buyback, right?
Yeah.
It comes back to your treasury. Now, all of a sudden, you might have a certain legal challenge here. So if you can talk a little bit about this, like to maybe either demystify or explain more details about it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So look, that's part of the reason why we have this two-tier structure, right? That's why it's necessary, two-coin structure. So what happens is that the wLITIs can be traded by anybody, right? With no KYC. You know, it basically is investors, and everybody has the chance to invest and get upside. Okay. To the extent that you want to come back and get your share, right? You will have to then come to the company, right? And you will have to go through a KYC process, right? That is what it is. And if you are a US investor that is not accredited, you know, that also will be an issue. Okay. But, and this is important, right? That's why we have this structure set up. All right. So what are the benefits, right, of you? Let's say that you're a US investor, you're my mom, okay? You're a US investor, you're not accredited, you own this token, you're enjoying making money out of it, right? If the value of the assets, okay, are worth $100 million, okay, there are going to be plenty of people in the pool that are going to be willing to buy it at $99,900,000, right, from anybody who can't or isn't comfortable going through the process necessary to own a share, right? And so that's sort of the hypothesis behind this. And it also goes to the Bitcoin example, right, that I was talking about, which is, let's say, for same concept, right? Let's say Bitcoin goes down by 50%, okay? We're in that market. What will happen is our token price will go down, right? The benefit of what we're trying to do is hopefully not for long, because what will happen? People who understand that the assets that we have are completely uncorrelated to all of that, and they know it's worth $100 million, okay? If our price goes down from 100 million to 50 million, guess what's gonna happen to all these institutional investors? That's a bargain, okay? They're gonna come in and they're gonna buy it, right? And it's gonna go back up, which helps everybody, all of the individuals, all of the people that we really want to be dealing with, right? Similarly, and maybe this isn't what people want to hear, okay? But if people get out way too ahead of this, right? And it trades up 50 times, right? Do you know what's going to happen? People are going to sell because the value of these assets are the value of these assets. And you know what? That's okay too, okay? I would rather have that happen than have somebody come in like my mom or dad at a 50 multiple price and then end up in Dogecoin world where, you know, where they lose the money that the person who comes in first is just as important to me as the person who comes in last.
But there's another challenge now that we're opening up this can of worms, you know. So you know, the token is going to be tradable, right? So we hear a lot of on PancakeSwap, on Uniswap, there are a lot of attacks, so to speak, like professional, like I would say speculators, right? Who are, they're adjusting their sniper bots to manipulate the price, and they can drive your price like, you know, incredibly high and then dump on you and basically profit from themselves, which means, you know, like if they're smart enough, they can find some proxy who's in the United States, send them this tokens. I'm giving you like a crazy scenario, but like
Sure.
we're talking about it. So then, and they will be able to basically still legally, like, you know, if you go through KYC, so they made a lot of money just purely by speculation. And then they can, if I understand it correctly, then they can also redeem it, basically exchanging it through wLITI, like with a ratio of 5,000 to 1 token. And they can become shareholders of your company by doing kind of more manipulative activities on the decentralized exchange. So do you have some I don't know, preventive methods that you thought about how to anticipate that?
So it's a good question, right? I mean, I think a couple of different answers. I think that the first thing is that DeFi is the idea of not having centralization, right? So the idea that somebody that we don't love, right, could come in, buy up wLITIs and be a shareholder, look, like that's a risk that exists for every company, right? And that's a risk that exists for us. And, we can't pretend that it's not there or try and contract out of it, because then we're going contrary to the values of the community, right? Which we're not going to do. So that's number one. In terms of protecting against it at the outset, look, I mean, this is why I have Jaime and the team, right, on the technical side, who are out there all day, every day, trying to do the best that they can, right, to make sure that there's no shenanigans going on, right? And one of the things that we've done that I'm really proud of is, we're starting off with a $1.2 million liquidity pool, right? That's locked up for 3 years, okay? 3-year lockup. Like, we are going to make sure that people understand, right, that there is a base of capital that's going to be there, that's not going anywhere, right? And somebody coming in with a couple $100,000 of liquidity to try and mess with it, it's going to be harder. Are there smart people out there? There are. And we have people that are working on that piece, but everything that we can do, we're going to be there. And our investors, like you said, they believe in us, right? I mean, if we need more, we'll have that conversation with them, but we're trying to set up about as fortress of a situation as we can. I think the other thing that's useful is that we've already raised a bunch of money, right? And so, we're not going anywhere, right? If we're not 2 months, 3 months, we're here for years, whether people like us or not, right? and we are. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to be giving out dividends to people. We're going to be sending out dividends in cryptocurrency, right? I mean,
to token holders and shareholders, just to clarify.
So the token holders are the shareholders. wLITI holders are not going to get dividends, right? The token holders are going to get dividends. But to be clear, there are only wLITI holders equal to 5,000, the number of token holders, right? And so, there's that money, that pie, right, is going to go out to everybody. And it's not like wLITI holders are going to get skipped over, right? Like that's not possible, right? But in order to send dividends out, you do have to be a token holder. Now, the one thing I will add there, okay, just to be very clear, is let's say we're doing a $10 dividend, okay, $10 per share dividend, all right? You may ask me, what happens if you're a wLITI holder that doesn't want to go through the process, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
The answer is there's going to be, this, right? For $9.90, there's an infinite amount of money, right? If people know that there is cash on the balance sheet that they're going to get, that they can see, right? They will buy up, and you as a wLITI holder want to monetize, there will be, ample opportunity to do that.
They'll find a way. Discount. Of course, that's no brainer for sure. I agree.
Totally.
Now the question is, let's come back to a few things also I think is important to mention. Are you going to do some burning of tokens or buybacks of the wLITI?
Yeah, so we're not, again, because the really important, I think, benefit there is the company is not selling wLITIs ever, right? You're not going to wake up one day and find that the company wants to make $20 million and so it's selling those. We're not doing that, right? That is not us. So we can't burn them, right? But we're not selling them. So that's not something that we're going to do. The value proposition from us is raising money, investing that money, and dividending it out, right? And I think people need to understand that it's not a currency, right? The value of this token is not based, okay, on what X person's willing to pay on day Y, okay? It will move based on that. But the value of this is the value of it, right? If we were buying houses, right, just because if the house is worth $1 million and the stock in the house trades down to $2, the house is still worth $1 million, right? And so, the value of this ultimately is going to be, the value of the assets that we have. And we're going to prove that day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out to people. So that we're not going to do. But, what I would like to do is I do want to tell you what is special about the wLITI, because there is a really, I told you there were two things, right, that I was really excited about. One was getting private equity to everyone. And the second one, I want to make sure that we leave a little time for it.
Yeah, I think both are impressive, and I think like what you describe now is actually a pretty interesting model. The fact that you're putting $1.2 million liquidity pool in Mia like right off the way, it will definitely balance the price, and I mean, I assume if you have like professional market makers that will just make sure that they, whatever happens, if somebody like tries to manipulate the price, you will just buy a little bit and there will be balance. So that's great. And then the fact that you're not planning to sell and you're public about it, right? That's also impressive, because a lot of the, in the crypto world, unfortunately, there's also like this narrative that like crazy rug pulls,
Yep.
acts, like all other aspects that happens, teams that are not 100% like, legitimate, and they have like purely bad intentions. The project can be amazing, but the team does some crazy mistakes, manipulate their treasury and playing against their token holders. So what you're describing is actually like the opposite, right? I would say that's actually pretty impressive long-term holding asset. Like, again, I wouldn't call it obviously a currency, right? But I would call it an asset that is linked to an operating business that is actually growing and allowing them to participate in something that they, let's be honest, like somebody like from the street, like, in out of the United States. I'm not even talking about the United States. Like, I'm talking about like different parts of the world. They would have no possibility to even participate in such a deal, right? So
you nailed it.
Yeah. So this is impressive, and so the last piece, like as an investor, like I'm always looking at the team. We usually start from the team, but it was such an exciting conversation about like the essence of the project that I think we covered as much as we could. I mean, obviously we can talk about it for hours, but I want to talk about the team. I think between yourself with your like exceptional credentials and experience, and your partners, like you also have a solid team, because you always look at the project. Okay, you can raise money in this bullish market. That's great. Like, from traditional finance, crypto, but then can you execute, right? So talk a little bit about your partners and who they are, and maybe like, why do you think that your guys going to be out there for 5-10 years?
Yeah, no, look, it's a great point, and we'll talk about it in two different ways, right? So I think the most important thing, right, is that, we've all done this before. Okay. So I've raised over $1 billion. I manage it for the better part of a decade, right? I've done it before, right? Jonas, Andy, Jaime, right? They've been running an intelligence agency in Switzerland, one of the most successful in the world, right? Mm-hmm. They've managed it. They've run it. They've done it before, right? Jaime is an absolute technological genius, right? He is the backbone. I sleep well at night knowing he's there. He sleeps well at night knowing I'm there, right? So the good thing about this is nobody here is starting something or being asked to do something that they haven't done before. We're just trying to do it for everybody. So I think, to me, that's the really important part, right? But I do want to say, and I know that we're low on time, but this is super important, okay? I didn't get to tell you about the second piece of this, which is what me and the guys came up with that tell you the caliber of people that we're dealing with, okay? 5 to 10% of every dollar we are raising, okay, we are going to use to fight crypto scams and fraud and rug pullers, okay? And it's not we're not going to make money off of that exercise, right? So I want to be clear, and then we should talk about it for a minute.
Sure.
If we raise $1 billion, which is ultimately where I'd like to be, we're going to have $100 million pool, okay, of capital that we are going to use on behalf of wLITI holders to go after people who have done fraud or scams. So if you own a wLITI token and you've had the rug pulled on you, or you've had a scam or fraud, right, you can send us the information. We will gather it. We're going to do diligence work on it. We're going to pick a couple of cases that we believe have merit, not that you weren't hurt, but that we can actually go and do something about. We're going to put them out to the community, and wLITI holders are going to vote. Okay. And at any given time, we're going to be doing at least one, if not 2 or 3, where we're going to go after these guys at no cost to the community. And everything other than our cost and overhead, 90% of what we make is going to go back to those wLITI holders. Okay. No cost, no nothing. This is about community, right? And I told you, this is the second thing that got me really excited about this, right? Is we got to get back. We got to stop this nonsense, right? Somebody has to stand up and say enough. And somebody has to stand up and put some fear in these guys that if you do that, somebody is going to come after you.
There are going to be consequences. Yeah.
They're going to be, and by the way, there's two stages of consequence. Consequence one is, can we, with the literal SWAT team of people we have, find out who you are? Okay, that's number one. And if we do find out who you are, we're going to let everybody know who you are. You're not going to be able to be anonymous. Okay. Yeah. So even if you think going to Siberia is the way to go, it's going to be hard for, we're going to, right? The second thing is, if you don't plan on being in Siberia, we're going to come after your assets, right? $100 million is a lot of money, right? And we are not looking to make money on that money. That is for our community. You mess with a wLITI holder, Liti Capital's coming for you. And, look, I hate to talk about myself a little bit, but if I was on that side, right, the last person that I would want to see coming for me is, me and Jonas. Like, that's not great, right? It's not great. So I did just want to kind of put that in there.
No, I think it is a great point. I think that the fact that you were actually vigilant, you care about the community, because that's a crucial problem. I can tell you openly, like, there's a lot of projects that are some of them are getting like scammed by those like professional like impersonators and scammers and attackers, like that they are anonymous, and like there are the investigations that being like prove that they are actually, some of them are part of big projects, because you have to be very, very sophisticated. You have to understand trading, you have to understand legal, you have to understand like social engineering, everything, right? So and yes, they benefit of doing some then later on like anonymous projects, hiding behind the fact that they don't have to disclose their identity as owners, and then do one project to like collect $50 million, like like a Ponzi scheme, and then disappear and do the next thing like in the coming like few months. So it is like I think it's damaging the entire industry, and I'm actually very excited. I'm very excited that you care. There's not a lot of people who care. There are people who talk about it. There's a big difference, like actually deploying capital and your own time and efforts and going after them. So, I mean, I would be definitely scared if like, some guys like you would actually I'm not sure. It's a separate topic for maybe a different time to even discuss. How's it even possible to identify a person who's anonymous creator of a project or the DeFi?
By the way, it's pretty cool. And I want you to know that we have our first case with that. And we are going to, we are setting it up right now so that when we complete that, which will be soon, that we're going to tell people about it, right? We're going to tell them how we did it. We're going to give the example so that people understand that this is not just words, right? Like, you would be flabbergasted at how everybody thinks they're going to get away with it now, right? Look, it's just like most crimes and most things. If you actually are really good and careful, whatever crime it is, even crypto fraud, a lot of times you're going to get away with it, right? That's the reality. But in this industry right now, these guys are so consequence free, right? That it is ludicrous the number of mistakes that they're making, right? If you commit a perfect crypto crime, I'll be very honest, we're not going to be able to find you, right? But guess what? Most people make mistakes, and if you make a mistake, we're gonna find you, and we're gonna that's just the reality of it.
We're gonna hunt you.
Look, it is what it is. You laugh, but like, that's what we're gonna do. The problem is nobody's incentivized to do it today. Governments aren't incentivized because there's no regulation or taxes that are coming from it.
Yeah.
People aren't incentivized because the cross-border and every issue that you have, you're gonna spend a big portion of what you would recover to even try and do it, and there's no guarantees. So who's gonna do it, right? We're gonna do it because we're not doing it for the money, right? We're doing it for a community. We're saying it out loud. 10% of whatever we have is going to be put aside for this. It's not a money-making exercise. We are going to use it, and we're going to go after people.
So on a pragmatic side, how much, so you mentioned that the community will have to vote for the case, right? So let's imagine you list like 3 different cases, right? And what would be the, like, the quorum, like, so to vote for any case?
So the quorum in terms of how many holders have to vote for it?
Exactly, like 51% or 70%?
No, not at all. Our goal is to take cases, right? Like what we think is going to happen and what we've already started to see, right? And you should visit us, Twitter, Telegram, right? Like, what we've already started to see is people are reaching out, right? And everybody we know, was scammed or know somebody close who was scammed. So we're going to take as many as we can, right? Part of why we want you to entrust us with the capital is the more money we have, the more of these cases we can take on, right? But the problem is going to be, we think we're going to have 50 or 100 at any given time. And of those 50 or 100, there's probably going to be 10 or 15 that are really actionable, right? And we can't do 10 or 15 at once, right? We're going to be able to do 3, 4, 5. So it's really the top vote getters, right? Even if it's only 5% of the community, if you get the most votes, we're going to go after that case, right? Yeah. So that's why you're only going to vote on cases that are pre-vetted by us, where we say, look, this is, we've looked at this and we think we can do something here.
Got it. No, that's great. So for now, they can go to liticapital.com and receive some basic information. Then they can where they can apply for this, for the cases where they want to. If somebody's listening from people who founded projects and they were victims of some scams.
Yep. Please, we'll take it all, right? So you can go to liticapital.com. You can find us Liti Capital on Twitter, right? Our Telegram group is Liti Capital Official, right? If you search those, we are there. We are listening. We have people whose jobs it is on those sites. They're moderators and admins whose job it is to gather that information and put you in touch with the right people. You can DM me directly at DVKY1979. That's my Twitter handle. That's the easiest way to do it. We're taking in as much information as we can. And if you trust us, right? If you trust us to be fiduciaries and invest your money, right? We are going to go out there and we're going to make a difference in this.
And I really respect you for this, David. I think that's a big commitment. I'll be honest with you. I haven't heard a lot of companies. You're probably the first who are so, I would say, so courageous to go after such cases, because I can only imagine how, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to actually go and do the hard work, to roll up the sleeves and do that. So I wish you a lot of luck with this. And
thanks.
There's another question, because I'm sure we're going to have another session. I'm very excited about what we do. I want to see the first case. Once you do the first case, I actually want to go and we should do another video to actually go after, because I have a lot of clients who would love to be your clients. I have a lot of friends who have suffered enough about this. We're talking about big numbers. So, and once you succeed, I'm sure it's going to be an amazing case study for the entire crypto community, right? And hopefully there's going to be more companies like that where we're going to unite and fight back from scammers, because it damages the reputations of people who work hard, put all their lives to make something great. And then there's just impersonators or people who are just trying to reap all the benefits with no consequences. So it's
literally the exact opposite of what we're trying to do here, right? Exactly. I'm not here trying to bring private equity to everybody so everyone can get the same returns, right? And meanwhile, there's people out there who are just taking people's money, right? Hand over fist, their hard-earned money, whether it's $50,000 or $4 million. We got one incoming of someone $4 million. It's just, so I'm with you.
So private equity for everyone and decentralized litigation finance. That's how I would to make the summary of what you guys do. Yeah. And I love it. And then the last question, which is, normally asked people, which is, the name of my podcast and YouTube channel is Holistic Investment. So for me, anything that people do, I'm sure that they have a higher goal, a mission, a purpose that gives them meaning in life. So that's why you told me about what's your passion with this project and your I want to also know your personal passion. I want to know what's the meaning in life to you.
Especially post COVID, it's a great question. For me, balance is the meaning of life for me. I love two things, right? I love being out there and making a difference, right? And by the way, I mean making a difference. Even when I was at the private equity fund, the making a difference was making money, right? But being out there and actually being a player in the game I have to be honest, I love it, right? It drives me. And family drives me. And the problem I had at the private equity fund is I was on the road 260 days a year, and I had all of one and not the other, right? And in the last year of COVID, it's been amazing, right, to have the family side of it. But for me, what's life about? I need both to really feel that balance. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'm really hoping that the next stage with Liti Capital allows me to kind of, you know, have both and have that balance, which is always elusive, right? But, you know, that's, to me, if I can have that, that's all I want.
Listen, the road to balance is already an amazing journey. Like, it doesn't matter if you succeeded or not. So I sincerely wish you that. I wish you balance in your personal life. I wish you balance with your project. I think you guys are amazing. I will share all the links in the description of the YouTube video and the podcast. So I urge people to actually contact you guys, like if they have like some proofs of their legitimate cases, and if they need help, I'm sure you're going to be happy to assist you on your Telegram channel, like where you can ask more questions and have an interactive discussion about, like, you know, what do you think about the Liti Capital as a project, and maybe some other interesting ideas. I'm sure people, they will hear you. So it's exciting. Listen, the first case you do, we'll have to come back to this topic and do a big case study for the entire community.
It's a deal. I'll be here.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate you having you.
Thanks a lot for having me. This was great.